name is Dr. Kathryn Pisaro. I would like to talk a little bit about Dvorak's biography. Most of this I got from the Grove Music Online, but I have to admit a little bit did come from Wikipedia. Dvorak's dates are 1841 to 1904. His musical life started at the age of 6 when he started taking violin lessons. He grew up in an area around Prague in the Czech Republic. Nowadays we call this area the Czech Republic, and at the time Dvorak was there, it was called Bohemia. So the words Bohemian and Czech are really representing pretty much the same area. His father was an innkeeper, a professional zither player, and a butcher. His father did let him become a musician as long as Dvorak worked on the organ. He was very specific about this. So Dvorak went to school at the Prague Organ School for his education. However, he made his living as a young man by playing viola in an orchestra in Prague. So he learned a lot about opera and about music from the viola standpoint of things. Feel free to insert a viola joke here if you want. He was too poor to afford opera tickets, so by playing the viola, he could hear a lot of opera, and he learned a lot from sitting in the orchestra and playing. When Dvorak was a young man, he was so broke that he had to share his apartment with 5 other people. I mean, I can't even imagine 5 roommates and not going crazy. But that's how he could afford rent. And on top of that, he had to teach piano lessons to afford his rent. So one of the nice things about him teaching piano lessons is that it helped him meet his future wife. One of his students and his pupil and his colleague, Josephina, in 1865, he was teaching her, and he fell in love with her. But she didn't love him back, and she married another man. So he married her sister instead. Now, Mozart fell in love with a girl, married her sister. Haydn fell in love with a girl, married her sister. Dvorak married a girl, fell in love with a girl, married her sister. I don't know. That's maybe some sort of composer thing. I don't know. They had a very happy marriage, though, and they had 9 children, with his oldest son writing a book about his father. So although Dvorak was making a living as a performer, of course, playing viola and teaching piano, he began doing a lot of composing, and he was beginning to make a name for himself as a composer in Prague. In 1874, he submitted his works for the Austrian State Prize for Composition. What he didn't know was that the famous composer Johannes Brahms was one of the judges. And Brahms was very impressed. Dvorak won the award also in 1876 and 1877. And Brahms liked his music so much, he put him in touch with his own publisher. And Brahms spent a lot of time promoting Dvorak's works. Dvorak also got a personal letter from one of the other judges offering to help him get his music known outside of the Czech region. So this enabled Dvorak to jump from being a local or a regional composer to a composer with an international reputation. As an internationally famous composer, he traveled 9 times to England, he traveled to Russia, and he lived and worked in America for many years. When he was in America, just a little side note, when he was in America, his music was still being published by Brahms' publisher. And Brahms helped him out with proofreading on those pieces, which honestly is a really tedious job. Dvorak respected this so much, he said, "I don't believe there's another musician of his stature in the whole world who would do such a thing," which is probably true, honestly. However, when Dvorak was in America, he started getting really homesick for his homeland, and he was starting to see more success in Europe. So he went back to Bohemia. He went back to being a professor at Prague Conservatory. He stayed at his country cottage for breaks, and he wrote some amazing music when he came back from America, including the opera you're going to hear, Rusalka. Brahms tried to get Dvorak to move to Vienna. And since Brahms had no children or family, you know what Brahms said to Dvorak? He said, if you need anything, my fortune is at your disposal. I mean, how sweet is that? The biographer Clapham writes that Dvorak was deeply moved, and tears came to his wife's eyes. But Dvorak said it was quite impossible for him, a Czech, to contemplate leaving Bohemia. So Brahms died the next year after that, and Dvorak came to visit him on his deathbed and attended his funeral. Dvorak is so famous by now that his 60th birthday is a national celebration. He's appointed by the Emperor of to the Austro-Hungarian House of Lords. He was made director of the Prague Conservatory. And in 1904, 76 choral associations gathered together with over 16,000 singers to sing a huge concert of Dvorak's music. That must have been amazing. 16,000 singers. However, Dvorak was sick, and he wasn't able to come to the concert. In fact, he had an attack of the flu on April 18th, 1904, and he died on May 1st at the age of 62. If you go see Dvorak's grave in his beloved city of Prague, a famous Czech sculptor created the bust on his gravesite. I would like to spend a couple of minutes talking about Dvorak in America, because he took some of the ideas that he had put in his American sketchbooks to use in the opera Rusalka. Dvorak was hired by the National Conservatory of Music in New York City in 1892, and he was hired to show Americans how to create a new national style of art and music in the United States. Dvorak believed and reflected in his music that a truly national music comes from folk traditions. And this is what he did with his music. He included Czech folk melodies, Czech dances, Czech rhythms, all of these things from his homeland. His operas often set scenes in architecture or costumes that are appropriate to the Bohemian folk traditions. So a group of Americans brought him over because they wanted to see what he thought the unique American folk traditions were that they could build their own music off of. So anyway, Dvorak, after being in America and listening to a whole bunch of music, Dvorak saw that truly national music in America, to him, was that of Native Americans and African Americans. This idea bothered a lot of white musicians on the East Coast. A lot of composers in America disagreed with Dvorak, and probably honestly what were for pretty racist reasons. One composer wrote in a rebuttal in the newspaper, he said, quote, that as our civilization is a fusion of European nationalities, so American music should be universal in style and character. So I want you to think about all the music that came out of America in the 20th century, all the amazing music that was put together. Who do you think won this battle between the white music establishment, who said that American music is and our civilization is a fusion of European nationalities, or Dvorak, who said that truly national music, the folk traditions of America, are found most clearly in the music of Native Americans and the music of African Americans, those two incredible musical cultures. So I want you to think about, was Dvorak right? Do you think he knew what he was talking about? While Dvorak was in America, he wrote his New World Symphony, premiered in Carnegie Hall, The American String Quartet premiered in Carnegie Recital Hall, and he kept a lot of sketchbooks of musical ideas he heard in America, some of which were used in the composition of this opera, Rusalka. There's a couple of aspects to Dvorak's time in America that I thought were very interesting that I'll share with you now. Fun fact number 1. In 1902, after Dvorak had returned to his beloved Prague, he was used as an inspiration for the progressive movement in American music. The composer Arthur Farwell accepted Dvorak's challenge to, quote, go after our own folk music, end of quote. So while most musicians, and myself included, don't really think of Dvorak as a particularly progressive composer, his respect for African American and Native American music did put him at the forefront of the progressive movement in America. Another interesting fact that's related to this is that because of the immense amount of respect Dvorak had for African American musicians at a time when they were not treated well in the United States, when he died, one obituary stated, "If it were possible, the Afro-American musicians alone could flood his grave with tears." I love this about Dvorak. I love when he came to America, he listened with open ears. He listened to what was beautiful and amazing without getting caught up in the situations we see at the turn of the century in the United States. And I love how he inspired American composers to go after our own folk music. Dvorak's music is really operatic, whether it's for instruments or for singers. If you think of the New World Symphony, which is probably one of the most popular pieces he wrote, think of the amazing melodies in that piece. The second movement is just gorgeous. There's great melodies in every movement of this piece. And the reason I mention that is because he used material from the American sketchbooks he created around that time that he composed the New World Symphony in the composition of Rusalka. For Rusalka in particular, Dvorak was very inspired by the libretto that was sent to him. People had heard he was looking for opera ideas, so he got a lot of librettos. He wrote the entire opera in just 6 months. It was finished in November of 1900. One of the interesting things I find about this opera is, despite the fact that this opera was hugely popular with the Czech public, Dvorak was hugely popular with the Americans, especially his instrumental music. And this opera was performed outside of the Czech region in Germany in 1910. Okay, so we have all of those. Dvorak's popular with the Americans. Dvorak's operas are huge in the Czech area. And it's already being performed outside of the Czech Republic, and it's being performed in Germany. But the opera was not performed at all in America until 1975 in San Diego. And it wasn't performed at the Metropolitan Opera until 1993. So there's a bit of a disconnect between the popularity of Dvorak's instrumental music and the popularity of Dvorak's opera, which is crazy because this is an absolutely beautiful piece. So it makes no sense to me, but this is the way it happened. I want to have you listen to this piece thinking of the words of the British music critic Rodney Milnes, who wrote in 2004 that he admired Rusalka for having, quote, a wealth of melodic patterns that are dramatic in themselves and shimmering orchestration. Listen to this piece and see if you agree with him about that characterization of Rusalka. I personally think Rusalka is an example of Dvorak at his absolute best. In the Grove Music Online, the author says that Rusalka represents Dvorak at the height of his maturity, exercising superb control over musical and dramatic resources. If you want to, there's a great performance of the entire opera on YouTube with helpful subtitles by Stanley Chang, and it's a glorious piece, especially the Song to the Moon, which was written. The Song to the Moon was written to be sung by the water nymph who was in love with the human prince who she sees swimming in her lake, and she calls on the moon to tell her prince she loves him in one of the most beautiful melodies ever written.